Hey friends, welcome to Virtual Roundtable here at Treach. My name is Reverend Doug Meyer, and I'm going to be kind of your moderator, host, and oversharer. This morning we're going to talk about worry, stress, and anxiety. Have those ever visited your house, or have you ever visited them? Start thinking about it. We've got two great friends that are going to share their stories. I'll sprinkle mine in a little bit on the side. Welcome, Lee and Jeff. Lee is a very creative person. She works for a startup software company here in Dallas, correct?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
She's also an independent filmmaker. Wow, that just sounds really cool. I mean, I don't know what all you're filming yet, but I think that's really super cool. And comes ready to share some of her story. And Jeff is an architect, works in designing space for multifamily. Is that the right way to say that? Okay. Yep. Grew up in Grand Prairie. Is brand new dad, just adopted two sons. I can't imagine that bringing any worry, stress, or anxiety to your life. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. For those of you who are brand new to this, Treach dreamed up this idea of kind of encountering, opening up the door, opening Pandora's box, whatever you want to call it, to the whole subject of which way is up, about our mental wellness and how we can be vulnerable, honest, super honest, that we all have stuff, right? I don't know anybody that doesn't have stuff. And if they do, I think they're probably, if they say they don't, they're probably lying. We all do, so let's talk about it. And what better place to do that than a church? Churches should own that and facilitate helping people find wholeness and healing in whatever way it comes. So that said, welcome. Grab a cup of coffee or soft drink or whatever is appropriate while you're watching this, and let's just kind of get down to it. I don't know which one of you guys wants to jump into this first, but I wonder, like, how old were you when you first had an awareness that, and maybe didn't have the language for it, but worry, stress, or anxiety, there was something cooking inside you that felt different?
I would say that my earliest recollection was probably in high school. I think there was a semblance in my mind that I knew I was queer, but I didn't really want to come to terms with it, and I didn't know how. And so when you ask me, Doug, what kept me up at night, it was that. It was grappling with my own identity, right? A really common saying, at least in the queer community, is that the first person you need to come to terms with is yourself. And a lot of times that can be the most difficult coming out experience. And so that kept me up at night, and how that would manifest is I'm just in my head a lot. And so everything is very internalized, and I'm running through a lot of scenarios in my head all the time. And the way that manifests physically, externally, is just through my body language. I'll, shake my leg a lot, and clean incessantly, so which is helpful, I guess. But yeah, that's my earliest recollection in high school.
Yeah. So did it ever become a hindrance, like academically or socially? Did your parents ever say, "Get over it. What's going on?" Or, I mean, how did it manifest itself outwardly? Would I have known that you were feeling any of those if I was doing life with you?
Being an Asian American, what that entails is, on the Asian side, we didn't really talk about feelings in, my parents' household. And so if I was visibly upset, I mean, my parents wouldn't really know how to ask. And so I can't recall ever expressing to my parents, "Oh, I'm feeling sad today." It just never came up. Or, "Oh, I'm feeling really angry," but I didn't know how to verbalize that to my parents, like if they had done something that upset me. And it wasn't until college that I learned what it means to be a healthy communicator. And it never hindered my experience at school socially or academically, but, especially when I was with my friends. Then it wasn't something I really had to think about. But again, going back to your initial question, it was at night where it was just me and my thoughts, and my mind just kept running.
Oh, yeah. Our thoughts, man. That factory never closes, does it?
It doesn't.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I think similar to Lee's story, just about coming out. I'm a little bit older than her, but I think especially for my generation, Gen X, it was a little bit more, it was easier in some ways, but more difficult. That was just this overriding gray cloud that was always there. How is this going to affect the rest of my life? How is it going to affect my family and, extended family and friends? And it's a lot of, it's a lot to carry. And I'm kind of a personality type that doesn't want to inconvenience or impose on anyone else. So I really internalize that a lot.
A lot is going on in your world. 2 little boys, just like suddenly overnight almost, right?
Pretty much.
So how are you helping? Let me rephrase that. How are you practicing? And maybe it's so new you don't even know yet. Not passing on your worry and anxiety to them.
Not very well. I'm trying. What I would say about these boys, they really are great boys. They have really sweet spirits. They're very loving, affectionate, bright, and they're just so thankful, I think, to have finally a forever home and a forever dad and a forever dog. Because they've never really had that. They're 7 and almost 9. So, imagine being that age and never having that stability. So I have to work on my end to not be so hard on myself. I try to, like all of us, do the best that I can. But I'm honestly in survival mode. They've been in my house for barely a week, and I just have to prioritize, like, okay, these are basics that we need to do. And some of the other things that I'm used to doing, keeping a clean house or, that kind of thing, I just have to give myself some grace. But the boys are good about, helping in the ways that they can. Their bathroom is really clean, which is surprising, for 2 little boys. So, but they, last night was tough. They have a history of complex trauma. They would be in some ways considered special needs. So my oldest, he had a meltdown last night, and it's hard for me to deal with because, the degree to which he melts down is not commensurate at all with whatever the inspiring incident was, right? It's not age appropriate, right? It's for something that's much younger, but I have to remind myself that he didn't receive what he needed when he was much younger to be able to soothe and self-regulate. He doesn't have that. So, like I said, it's tough, but last night's meltdown was not nearly as long as last weekend's meltdown, so I'm seeing some progress. And then when it was over, he came out of his room and was loving, and, he was back to himself. So I'm just hoping that it gets to that.
I can imagine that is like an everyday, I know you chose and you're full of love for it, but it's probably also exhausting. You found a whole new level of tired.
Yeah.
Right.
And then by the time we were all ready for bed, everybody showered, teeth brushed, then my dog hopped up on the bed and peed all over it.
Well, that was just the exclamation mark of the day.
I know. So I've just ripped. Anyway, it wasn't my finest moment, but it was like, okay, I've got to, strip the sheets. I've got to crate him. I've got to get these boys to sleep. And I told him, I said, look, on Saturdays and Sundays, please don't wake me up before 7, unless it's an emergency. And they were really good about it. And they picked up on that. And they're like, are you okay, Dad? Or do you need a hug? And they didn't wake me up until 7. But at 7:00, which is fine. But I guess I don't even remember the question. But I feel like that was my night last night. And I did the best I could with it. I'll hopefully continue to do better. But, I had a whole, before they came in, ways of, eating healthy and on a regular workout schedule, a midday walk with my dog. Those were things that were really helping my mental health that I'm not really able to do now. So like I said, right now I'm in survival mode. Once I get those basics figured out, then I think I'll be able to better tackle those other things. But I've been preparing for this for a while, and I knew that at first I'll be in the trenches and I'll be okay, until I kind of get that down and have a comfortability to start, okay, what do I need?
Right.
So
yeah, I think self-talk is a really important resource to tap into, to for instance, worry, stress, anxiety give us opportunities to learn how to self-manage, right? Whether that's self-talk or just knowing, hey, what we're in right now isn't a forever. It's a stage, and we're all going to grow out of this, and to extend huge amounts of grace to yourself. And then pretty soon you'll learn, chicken tenders, Cheerios, wet wipes. I mean, there's just things that I can imagine, like be kind to yourself, because everybody else who has kids, they got the starter package. They got to slowly creep into where you are, and suddenly you just were like, boom, on. And I can't imagine. Kudos to you for wanting to do that. You're a hero in my book for doing that, and imagining the huge life investment that you're putting in those boys, and the forever ripples out that's going to have. So, maybe if you just go there and go, this story's going to have a happy ending. Right now, we're having a hard time scratching it out, but.
Something in what you just said, something that I've always done is, even in those darkest moments, I mentally fast forward to that point to where it'll be okay. Whether it's right after I came out to my parents, I knew it would be horrible, and it was, but I knew that at some point it wouldn't be, right? And, I know at some point with the boys, we'll be on a good schedule, some point, at work. And that has been kind of a coping mechanism for me to be able to just know that everything will be okay. I have that end goal in mind. I can visualize it. I can see it. And then that helps me to kind of break down all those little steps in between to help get me there.
I think that's a great mental gift. Otherwise, I think we would all just feel like we were in a big old dark sinkhole and ready to throw in the towel or let go of the rope. Say a word or two about like your tribe, your immediate group of folks right now that you're doing life with. Does it ever come up? Do you have other friends? Y'all talk about worry, stress, anxiety? Is that hey, let's go have a glass of wine and talk about, how does that get verbalized? What's the context for that, Lee?
That's every situation with my friends ever. So my wife and I are very adamant about asking those deeper questions, right? Just because I don't want to see you and, spend this precious time together and talk about the weather or like, oh, look at that dog walking. and so, if it's been a while, and even if it hasn't been, going beyond, oh, what's new in your life? What's going on, to, hey, what was the most devastating part of 2020 for you? Or what's something that has made you feel anxious recently, right? So those conversations, and they do happen. I think I'm very fortunate to be someone who, is with someone who's also a social butterfly. So we're very comfortable navigating situations where there's a lot of people we don't know. My wife and I are both incredibly friendly, I would say. And so when we first moved to Dallas from California, she has one cousin here. We didn't know, much like what Jeff said, we didn't really know anyone in this new city. And so it wasn't until we took the step to visit churches, and our first destination was Oak Lawn, that we really met a community of friends who are now our best friends today, Alyssa and Jeff included. And so how that has manifested is, we're very adamant about maintaining these relationships, about checking in with each other. And I already feel comfortable talking to anyone because I'm an oversharer, but also I'm not afraid to dive deeper into what makes me sad or angry or upset with my friends. And everyone is very receptive to these conversations, so that also helps.
I wonder if that doesn't help in a way. It kind of serves, in my mind, what I'm hearing is like it's my backup therapy. It's kind of like my community where I feel safe, where I can share pretty much anything, and I can be honest, which is, I think kind of novel in a culture that's all about achievement and about, excess and this and that. Jeff, do you have that same kind of community? Do you have, I'm picking up on maybe you also are a participant at Oakland?
Yeah. And in fact, you were talking about our tribe, and Lee is definitely a part of that too. I think that she and I share that same approach to friendship that, I want to get down to the real stuff, right? I mean, I want to have meaningful relationships and interactions with people. This past year obviously has been difficult for everybody. I'm single, and at the time that the pandemic started, I was dating somebody, so I kind of went into the pandemic only seeing that one other person, right? And then, months into it didn't work out. So then, that was tough. I was kind of alone in that way. And then my dog ended up dying. It was just a lot of stuff. But I know that everybody has their own COVID story. So I haven't been as good about being proactive in maintaining relationships through the pandemic as probably I should have or would like to. But, in normal times, I see them at least once a week. And even to a greater degree, Lee and her wife both have agreed to play an outsized role in my kids' lives. They went through a really rigorous vetting process, and they were happy to do it. I went through a similar all the things that they've done, I've had to do too. So I understand that it's a lot of work and it's really inconvenient, but they did it with a smile, and, we're really happy to do it. And, that's really touching to me. So, that's the kind of tribe that I have,
Sure.
So even though we haven't been able to see each other weekly and in the same way as before, I have these deep, abiding friendships that I know I can count on. And for somebody with my personality, like I said before, I'm very loath to impose on other people or ask people for other things. I think it's not natural for me to advocate for myself, but I think, especially now that I've got these two boys in my life, it's much easier for me to advocate on their behalf and ask people like Lee and her wife to say, hey, can you go through this so that these boys will have a backup if they need to stay somewhere? And I know that they have trusted, loving adults in their lives that are family. So
it's an interesting experience, I bet, to feel like sometimes I think we make up, or I do, well, I have family, they have to love me or put up with me. But to have people who choose to love you and know you and still choose to love you, remember years ago, I think it was Hillary Clinton's book, but I think that just that phrase, it takes a village. We all begin to experience the value of village and how village can be mutually supportive. Other people choose to invest in you, you choose to invest in them, and there's this great harvest, if you would, of trust and collegiality and intimacy. And, I want to believe that those are great anecdotes for worry, stress, and anxiety. It's hard to prescribe, though. So I don't know quite how we get there other than telling everybody, hey, go find your tribe. And that's really hard if you're not even sure who the heck you are. So in your journeys, was anybody ever dismissive of, like when you began to verbalize worry, stress, and anxiety, did you ever get like stupid comments, dismissive comments that were like, oh, you're great, I don't know what you have to worry about? I know my experience has been that sometimes, I will, what's the word, perseverate on a subject so much that I know I drive the people around me crazy, but anybody ever said to you, just get over it, you're fine?
Yeah.
Jeff, what, really?
I mean, not to throw people under the bus, but I think that
everyone will remain nameless.
Right. I think that successive generations have, the younger you are, the more open you are, the more apt you are to seek out, whether it's therapy, whatever it is that's going to be good for your mental well-being. I think older generations tend to suppress that, and there's less of this is my experience, let me say. There's less of a desire or an inclination to do that kind of self-introspective work and expose those vulnerabilities and weaknesses as things that, okay, I really need to address. I think, especially with older generations, there tends to be a stigma around therapy or anything that kind of has a touchy-feely, mental wellness, that kind of thing. So I know when I've struggled before, when I brought that to, the trusted older people in my life, I don't think that they received that in the way that I had hoped. So I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was a teenager. And that was a huge, and actually that may have been even before the coming out, the biggest worry and stress. But that was something too that I was like, okay, something's wrong with my body. Something's not right. And I was kind of trying to advocate for myself, like I need to go to a doctor, I need to see something, but it's not something you can see, right? It wasn't until one day I woke up and my fingers were like purple sausages. And I was like, okay, this is not right. That it was kind of, oh, okay, well, there is something to it. It's not just, so I think that's a good example of it took a physical manifestation of what was going on in the inside for the people around me to recognize that, oh, okay, this is something that needs to be addressed.
So Lee, I'm familiar a little bit with you and your story, and I understand that you've just come out of some pretty challenging seasons as well. Do you mind kind of opening that door for us as much as you're comfortable?
Yeah, of course. So for a majority of the pandemic, I felt like we had gotten into a really stable day-to-day routine. And as much as I love spontaneity, I also really love predictability. And so it was the third week of February where, again, life was going as normal, and I had a huge curveball thrown at me. My mom had called at 11:30 p.m. and she said, hey, your sister's in a lot of pain. Should she go to the hospital? And I was like, what? Pain? Like this really just came out of left field. And, she puts the camera on my sister, and we're trying to ask her questions about the pain, on a scale of 1 to 10. What is that like for you? And I just feel like she was still downplaying it, but she had said a 7, a 6 or a 7. And that was already a lot of cause for concern. And so she wasn't crying yet, but, after a few minutes of being like, hey, you really don't need to suffer like this. We have insurance, like, let's take you to the hospital. That's when she started breaking down and crying because she just doesn't like imposing on anyone. And so that's why I say she was probably downplaying the level of the pain. And so my parents rushed her to the hospital, and they're in California, so I'm feeling really helpless from Dallas. And my wife and I talked, and she said, you have to go home. And we were on the same page. And so I had booked a ticket for the next day to fly back to California. And I was there by 9:30 p.m. on Monday. And it was just a really jarring experience because, again, I had gotten used to routine. And then we find out my sister has a large mass in her abdomen. And no one wants to hear that, right? And so it was really scary when the doctors at the hospital that she went to said, this is too large for us to operate on. We need to transfer you to Stanford. And Stanford is a very great hospital and teaching institution, right? And so that freaked all of us out, right? What do you mean you can't handle this mass? And so that, just catalyzed a really stressful month and a half for me because my parents, they speak English, but not as fluently as someone who grew up in the States. And so I was helping them navigate scheduling appointments and communicating what the doctor was telling me back to them in a way that they could understand, while also trying to be this pillar of strength for my family. What I knew internally and what everyone else was telling me was, you really need to just hold it together. And knowing my sister's personality type, she and I go to worst case scenarios all the time. But knowing that, I knew I had to be uplifting and optimistic, and in a way that was also not dismissive of her fear, right? And so prior to that call on Sunday night, I had started seeing a chiropractor for just a week, and then I had to fly home. And it was during that month and a half or month that I was in California that my body just tensed up in a way I had never experienced before. And I started feeling physical pain, which was really tough. And going back to what we said earlier about me internalizing my fear and my worries, I feel like I was approaching an extreme and a threshold that I had never encountered before. And I went to a chiropractor appointment before flying home, and I didn't mention anything to him. And he was like, whoa, your nerves are supercharged right now. They're overcharged. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, my body is already starting to react. And he had detected it. And so in California, I really didn't have the energy to do anything because I was working at 6 a.m. instead of at 8. And there was nowhere for me to go to break down and cry and release everything that I had been holding internally. And so that was really tough because I felt like that was something I couldn't verbalize and really feel relieved by, right? Like it was so pent up. And 2 weeks into it, 3 weeks into it, I had mustered the energy to go on a run. But even then, I just felt so dejected. And the best way I can explain it is I feel like I was just holding my breath for that entire month. Because after the surgery, then it was also like, well, we have to wait 2 weeks to find out whether or not this mass is cancerous or not. It could just be a mass, but it could also be stage 3 ovarian cancer. And so we held our breath until the very last second in which they received the pathology results, and they said, no, there's no well, first it was cancer, but luckily it was localized in her right ovary. And so there was no need for chemotherapy, and now it's just going to be surveillance moving forward. But again, that was the month and a half part that we had to wait until. And gosh, something that I've been thinking about recently is the possibility of worst case scenarios coming true overshadows any relief you feel when best case scenarios do happen. So it was ideal, right, that she got the surgery that she needed to make sure that the cancer wouldn't spread. But the trauma and the fear that we collectively experienced as a family and as myself, and I wasn't even the one who had cancer, that's really going to take some time to undo, or not even undo, but to process. And so while I am breathing a little more easily and I feel less tense, I still break down about that, right? And the weirdest part about this entire situation is that she's only 17 years old, which was why everyone was so concerned. But
wow,
we're all doing a lot better now, thank goodness. And I was talking to my mom the other day, and like I said, for the first time, she's finally breathing more easily. We're all just more relaxed now.
The word that comes to my mind, well, a lot of come to mind. I'm really glad that she's doing okay. But just exhaling sometimes, when you have that consciousness of like you're just holding your breath and maybe even holding, maybe like swimming, going underwater, holding your breath. So today and tomorrow and the next day, what are going to be the things that you do that help you breathe deeper? Maybe, I don't know, do either of y'all skip? Do you just like frolic? I mean, what are the things that give you a giddy up in your step? Is it, hanging out with friends? Is it going to church? Is it not going to church? Is it, where's your place that feeds your soul?
Right now, for me, it's very different, right? I get a lot of joy out of my boys if they're having a good day. Like I mentioned before, they have a very complex history of trauma, but they really are genuinely good souls. So if I know that they're upbeat and having a great day, that makes it all worth it for me. So at home, that's what gives me joy. At work, I've been fully vaccinated, and we're starting to go back into the office, which I've really missed a lot. So this past week was my first week to be fully back in the office, and that has given me a lot of joy too. I love the work that I do, but I also love the relationships I have there, and I think that there's just been a really great synergy. I think there's been a renewed focus, and we have a lot more work. We probably have 3 times as many projects now than when we went into the pandemic. So that's great too. I mentioned before about my tribe, Lee and her wife, Alyssa, a lot of others. Most of them I know through church. We haven't had in-person church yet. We've been able to meet up in our own ways throughout, but it's not the same like it used to be. We were able to do it all the time. But I think for me, just knowing that if I reached out to any of them and said, hey, I need this, they would be there. So that keeps me going.
Yeah. That's to be so clear of your understanding of being loved. It's kind of overwhelming sometimes, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So last chance. Any little nugget you would want to share? Maybe somebody's watching this and they're just in the throes of trying to figure out which way is up and what do I do next? I feel like I'm stuck in this loop of worry, stress, anxiety. What would you say to them?
For me, I'm constantly caught up in a state of planning for the future, and I have all my lists to power me through. But for those who are always caught up in their own head and, experiencing that mental anguish of running through these fake scenarios or just overthinking, I would say that, and it's a practice that really needs to be drilled in, but if someone is in their head so much, then making an effort to do mental check-ins. So for myself, to not get so caught up in planning for the future that may or may not happen, I try to do mental check-ins while I'm cooking or while I'm outside playing with my dog, just to make sure that I recognize how great of a life that I have the privilege of living, and just being present in that moment. So
that's a great practice. Jeff, how about you? Do you have similar practices?
Well,
besides
I think
right now just trying to breathe and
yeah. But I think the one consistent thing over maybe the past couple of years actually is I have a weekly therapy session. That's something that, I mentioned before about that having a stigma. I don't think I ever had that hang up about it, but at the same time, I wasn't personally ready to start doing that. It just seemed overwhelming trying to find the right person. And I really lucked out. I mean, he's like the perfect person for me. And like I said, we've been doing this, weekly just about for almost 2 years now. And I really credit him for helping me power through issues with my family, issues at work, even where I am today, being a dad with these boys. There's no way I would have done that without his, kick in the seat. He said, this is something you've always wanted to do. Why haven't you done it? And so he's kind of picking apart all my excuses. And then it's kind of, okay, yeah, why haven't I done that? So I think I would strongly advocate that for anybody. If you find the right person and if you're willing to put in the work, it can be so fulfilling, and it has made all the difference for me. So, and even during the pandemic, just, I like to be in person, but having a video chat, I can have a lot of anxiety going into that, and then I can let it out and we can kind of talk it through. And there's just such a huge difference, even after that 1 hour session, mentally, even physically. I feel like, okay, you know what, I can tackle this. I've got the tools, and somebody has helped set me straight to be able to attack it. So I would really encourage anybody that's on the fence about should I do that. I wholeheartedly advocate that.
What I make up from both of y'all and just my own personal experience is that you can't overvalue self-care, and that whether it is being courageous, in relationship to your own boundaries, but, get help, talk about it, name it, turn to a trusted friend, turn to a stranger, turn to somebody, right? And take that first step, whether it is, individual therapy, group therapy, a pastor, a best friend, somebody. Start talking about it. You don't have to carry this big old load, right? You don't have to do that. You got a tribe out there that's just waiting to love you and care for you. This has been great. Thank you. I feel like we've had church in a way. This is kind of just a sacred conversation, and I so value your time and your willingness to go there, to share, the joys, your struggles, and all that. And I hope it's been helpful, because I think what we have just done is helpful for everybody. And we really appreciate that you've been a part of our virtual roundtable conversation. And if you want to get to know Jeff and Lee even more, I think they have agreed to a deeper dive conversation with Alyssa. Is this true? Oh, man. Hold on.
She's forcing us.
All right. Well, those will be great. And in the midst of that, I think that there will be ways that you can follow up with them through an email, or just A, to say thank you, and B, maybe to ask them a question. So anyway, hope this has been helpful. Have a great day. Take care.